Now, how many of you in this room are salespeople? Let me see your hands. If you're an owner of a business, you better be raising your hand. If you are a parent, you better be raising your hand. Because by the way, are kids great salespeople, yes or no? I mean, you don't have to teach them how to deal with rejection. They just let it pass on by and keep coming, right? You can't have an ice cream cone, 10 minutes later they're licking on one with a smile on their face, right? No one taught them any scripts. No one taught them anything. What I want you to get is that the single most important skill in life, we hate the word selling, so I'll give you a word that it really is that doesn't have the negative connotation. It's the word that all leaders have. What would that word be? Influence. What changes companies is leaders. The only way to change a company is leadership. If I want to change a company that I own and I want to make a shift in that company, the number one thing I'm going to do is shifting leadership. That might be taking leaders to a different level. That might bring new leaders in. That might be new leaders of new voices, with new perspectives, with new skill sets, new directions. But we need to take things to another level. Leaders solve problems and leaders maximize resources. If you're going to solve problems, you can't do it yourself or it would have already been solved. You have to get others to help you to do it. That requires influence. True? If you're going to get people to maximize resources, that requires influence. If you're going to get people to partner with you, provide you resources, capital, suppliers, anything, that requires influence. If you're going to have an impact on your kids or your community or the world, that requires influence. There is no more important skill of leadership than influence. And yet most of us think of it like selling, and as a result, we don't master influence. So I'm not here today to try and get you to become a master of influence in 45 minutes or so. Am I chatting with you here because we have so many of the speakers. This is the area of life I am most focused on. Because I know that if you can't influence, you can't lead. But if you can influence powerfully, intelligently, with integrity, there's no limit to whatever you can envision and what you can make real. And if your influence becomes not just you as the influence, but you're able to influence systems, people, company, culture. If you can turn other people into influencers, now whatever you vision about can be made into reality. And so as a skill of influence, we got to ask ourselves, how many agree leaders are what change companies? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Say aye. And leaders' number one skill is influence. If you agree, say aye. But then the question becomes, how do you influence? How do you influence consistently with integrity? You can influence many ways. You can do it without integrity. But the good news is we live in a world today where whatever you do, it's transparent to the world because there are no secrets anymore, are there? Try to have a secret today, bless you. You can forget the secret. With the internet, with the culture we have, with the way the world is today, there are no more secrets, and whatever you think is still possible to keep a secret, give it 3 or 4 more years and it'll be impossible. Every phone call you make is recorded. There's no single phone call that goes in and out of North America that they don't have a recording of, and they can search by word, by tone, by tempo. They can even recognize voices now. There is no such thing as privacy. Everything you've ever put on the internet is there forever, and people know it and can search it. The way you write is searchable now. You can not sign your email, you can put it on somebody else's email, and the structure of your language and the way you influence things can be studied at this level. So the good news about that is manipulation as an ongoing tool for success is over. But adding value will never go out of style. Truth will never go out of style. So influencing with integrity is the secret. But what really influences people? Do facts and figures, we give you enough facts and figures out of a core story, is that going to influence people? No. It's the weaving of that story together in a way that produces what shifts people. And that's human emotion. Ultimately, the big game here is emotion. You have to influence emotion. You have to influence the emotion of your people. If you're going to maximize resources, and if we all agree, as we talked about the other day, it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of what? Resourcefulness. If you're creative enough, if you're playful enough, if you're determined enough, if you're focused enough, you can find a way. If you're giving enough, if you're generous enough, if you're honest enough, if you're courageous enough, you will get people to help you. You will find the way. You will make that thing happen. You'll access the resource. You get someone to coach you, teach you, loan it to you, let you try it, drive it, experience it. So it's the ability to influence emotion because that's what affects our intellect. That's the bottom line. A core story is only there to give you a set of facts to educate someone that will make them emotional enough to make a decision. And what they do is they go through a series of things that you have emotions about. They may say them in a non-emotional way, but the only reason they work is because you know they're going to open the person's emotion. How many agree with me on this? Say aye. So as leaders, we can never forget that humans are emotional creatures, including ourselves. And to influence other people, we have to know what already influences them. And we can't ever forget what truly influences them. It's going to come down to our ability to connect with them at a deep emotional level or get others to do the same. Here's how I'd say it in a really simple term. To influence someone, you have to already be influenced. Right? To move somebody, you better be moved. To touch somebody, you can't touch somebody about your product or service or vision or idea or your company if you're not touched. To persuade others, you have to be persuaded. You can't give somebody else what you don't have. Now, you may have it intellectually, and here's the challenge. When you first meet somebody in your relationship, and you're all excited, what's the level of energy like? 0 to 10, make the sound of that energy. You meet somebody you're totally excited by, make the sound of it. 6 months, 6 years, 20 years later. It's scary, isn't it? And it's not time, because there are people I've been with them, been together 65 years, and they're still out of their mind for each other. They make the same amount of noise you did in the beginning here. What changes is, very often, when you're around something enough, I don't care what it is, there's a law called the law of familiarity. The law of familiarity says this: if you're around something enough, you take it just a little bit for granted. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's not that you don't care, it's that you get used to it. It's that the variety of it is not quite as high. It's not so new, and with that, sometimes you give it less significance. Even though in your heart you know it's significant, you don't keep the aliveness of it. It becomes something you intellectualize versus something you feel inside your body with a passion. So there are people say, but we love each other. Yeah, well, that's great. You know, hug each other every now and then. You say you love each other, little kiss like that. Was that how it was in the beginning? No. It isn't time. It's that most people don't understand that this emotion, this intensity, this passion has to be constantly reinforced every single day. And like any muscle, if you don't use it, So then you have the base understanding why you do what you do, but you've lost the energy that makes it alive. And so if you're going to be touching people, you got to be touched. So then the question is, how do we influence ourselves? How do we influence other people? We got to get them into their emotions. We got to get ourselves into the emotions that are going to move us to action. And we got to do that ongoing, because otherwise all the stuff you wrote down will die. It'll die in your book. It'll die in your head. There has to be a level of emotion, a level of hunger in you that makes you go follow through. There's got to be a level of energy in you that when you go share it with people, you're able to influence them to follow through. And when they don't do it, enough to get back in there with them again and get them to do it again. This is where the whole game gets won or lost. Do you agree or disagree with me on this? So what we got to look at is, first of all, us. How many of you have days when you wake up and you feel like, I don't want to talk to people today? How many got days like this in your life? Say aye. But again, as I said the other day, if you're the leader, you don't have that choice. If you're the leader, you have to get in a good state. If you're the leader, you have to get yourself in that place. And how many of you have had some gut checks? Let me see again in the last 6 months, 12 months in your business with economy changing like it's never changed before. How many have had those gut checks? Say aye. So what do? We have to become masters of influence, which means we have to be able to master the state of our own organization. To master the state of our own organization, we've got to know how to change that. How fast, my friends? How fast? And where does it have to start? Ourselves, since we're the first constraint. And if we can do it with ourselves and influence, then we can teach everybody else to influence. We've said business is innovation and marketing. You have to influence people to innovate, because they're not going to just do it because they're used to what works and it's easier and they know it. Innovation means massive what? Change. How many people go, give me more massive change in my life with all the other things I'm trying to hang on to? They're not going to do that. You have to influence people to innovate. And marketing is influence.